So today I want to talk about the non-scientific reason of the differences between the APS-C to full frame to medium format cameras. If you're like me, you're a photographer that just likes to experiment with different types of cameras, focal ranges, and everything. And you might be wondering what would be your next camera when it comes down to figuring out if you want to go maybe with an APS-C to full frame or maybe to medium format. I want to talk a little bit about the differences that I've noticed myself when it comes down to these cameras in hopes that it could help you out to figure out what camera you want to go with if you're on the fence of trying to go with one of these styles. It's not so much about the brands that I'll be talking about per se, but more about what my experience has been with the type of cameras with the APS-C, full frame to medium format. So the first thing I want to talk about and start with is the APS-C. APS-C cameras are just in general a very good camera to start with if you're not sure about photography. For me personally, because of the cost effective, the price point when it comes down to the bodies versus the lenses and the size, it's a great way to get into photography when you're just wanting to start out. APS-C cameras are very great because they're fairly small and compact, as well as their lenses whenever it comes down to getting used to it, since most people tend to come from a phone. So if you're wanting to dive into a little bit more photography and videography, APS-C line of cameras are phenomenal to start with. I used to have a Canon SL2 that I started with, and it was an APS-C camera that was actually not a mirrorless camera until I got it stolen, and then I moved on to getting a Sony a6000. The Sony a6000 was a great starter camera for myself to get more the ins and outs of how to work a camera, especially for the price point. At the time, I think I got it for like $550 with a kit lens, and it was a great camera to get myself into just learning more about photography and videography as I progressed and got more knowledge to be able to upgrade. Now, not necessarily do you need to upgrade from an APS-C to go to full frame, but that's just the route that I took myself. The good thing about the APS-C is you get really great image out of it, but there are some limitations. For me personally, I've noticed that with APS-C cameras, they just tend to hinder more into the low light capabilities, just mainly because the sensor is a lot smaller. So with that being said, it's just not gonna perform as well as a full frame camera would. Now, is that gonna be the same case for all, APS-C versus full frame? Not necessarily, but it's just, in general, that's the outcome that happens. The good thing about APS-C cameras is they tend to have fairly good autofocus, fairly good video, and if you're wanting to dive into it that way, I would recommend trying to start off with an APS-C camera before you go into full frame if you're just barely diving into your, camera world. Now we're gonna move on to the full frame type of cameras. This is a Sony a7C Mark II, so it's not the usual size of all full frame cameras. This is the more condensed version of it. But the reason why I wanted to use it is because a lot of people have been contemplating starting with a full frame camera of this caliber versus going with the APS-C because of comparison sizes. But overall, the full frame cameras are just a little bit of a different breed when it comes down to that sweet spot. You get a lot of great autofocus, a lot of great video, and as well, fairly good overall low light capabilities. It just depends on the brand that you're using. For example, I shoot mainly Sony with the full frame, and when it comes down to low light capabilities of my Sony a7S III and my a7 IV and the a7C Mark II, ZV-E1, they're all phenomenal in low light. One more than the other, but because of their bigger sensor, it just works a lot better than when it was with my, APS-C cameras. So now, as you see the progression of going with the cameras, there's gonna be a couple things that I want you to kind of pay attention to. The reason why a lot of people tend to go with the full frame is because it's almost like the best of both worlds between medium format and the APS-C. You get a little bit of a smaller body and, smaller lenses that you would with the, medium format, but you don't get as small of bodies as you would with the APS-C. So it kind of, compromises and also, balances out as much as possible. For me, the reason why the full frame line of cameras and lenses works for me personally is for the type of work that I like to do, whether it comes for these YouTube videos and as well for photography. I just personally like the way it looks, how it feels on the hands as well, and just the performance overall for the bang for my buck. It is a bit more expensive to use a lot more of the full frame cameras and lenses compared to APS-C. But it really just depends now because a lot of APS-C cameras tend to start getting a little bit pricier. It just depends on what you're looking for. So now with the full frame type of cameras, you get a little bit better just video specs most of the time just because of the bigger sensor and a little bit more attention to detail in my experience. I've been noticing that a lot more full frame cameras have just been coming out with kind of unreal specs. I mean, you have some that shoot 8K RAW internally now. You have some of them that have a like 7.2K downsample to 4K, things of that sort that just add a better, cleaner image. So if you're wanting to go a little bit with the video specs of things, probably full frame would be a nice step up for you than APS-C. Although there are some great APS-C cameras, so it's just more of a preference, like I said, just my non-scientific research of it, if you will. Now, one thing that you'll notice with the full frame cameras and the lenses is, despite of this body being smaller, the lenses are still fairly big. So if you're not wanting to have something bigger, then probably going full frame and especially medium format is not going to be for you, and that's just how it is. But now comparing it back a little bit to the APS-C so that you kind of see the correlation between all of them, is that with the full frame lineup of cameras, you have a better sensor overall, you have better low light reading, just most of the time faster overall cameras with more specs because they're catered more for the prosumer type of cameras, for the consumer as well, versus the APS-C tends to have a little bit more for, you know, introduction type of specs. There are some APS-C camera that have amazing specs. Obviously, Fuji tends to have quite a bit of them. Like I think it's like the X2HS and all those kind of type of cameras. Even Sony coming out with their A6700 and things of that sort. But you have some limitations, like I said. So it's kind of like the middle ground where you get a little bit bigger camera body, but you get a little bit more specs out of it, versus the APS-C, you tend to have a fairly smaller body. So you kind of have to pick and choose what you want out of it. Now we're gonna move on to the medium format. Medium format is a great type of camera body and lens if you want something that just feels good in the hand. For me personally, the Fuji GFX 50S Mark II, yeah, that's a mouthful right there, is just very great in the hands. I haven't personally used like the bigger version of this one just because, to be honest, I wasn't interested in going that big. But the bigger version of it felt, to be honest, like when I used to have my Sony a7R III with the external battery bank that you could add to it. So it just felt bigger and everything like that. So if you're liking those DSLR type of bodies, that's kind of what it reminds me of. And it's just more clunky and chunky. So you start gaining more weight and, you know, real estate versus the other ones. So it starts kind of going in that aspect of what you're wanting. Now you do have a bigger sensor when it comes down to the medium format, which is a sought out look that some people like, especially on film. That's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to get this camera for my wife, because I would get to use it for one, but two, it's just the medium format look of things just really are pleasing to the eye of just how it just looks. It's hard to describe it scientifically, but for me, non-scientifically, it just looks good and it feels good. The drawback of these type of cameras is that they're a lot slower with the autofocus, a lot slower with just, you know, everything within the camera itself mechanically and kind of software type. At least my experiences with most medium formats that I've seen and or now have, which it comes down to that aspect between these three. You're having to figure out what you want out of it. The medium format is more to slow yourself down, to be a little bit more of an artistic kind of feel of things to me personally. I think the full frame is more for the business type of things where you need to be a little bit faster on the go, faster autofocus. And the APS-C is more of like kind of like that educational, maybe fun kind of type of things to take memories and photo shoots for fun as you keep progressing in your career. Now, is that really how everybody's gonna see it? Probably not. I'm sure somebody's gonna comment saying, oh, well, like I think I started with full frame or something, or whatever they wanna go with, and that's okay. Everybody's journey is different. For me personally, that's just how I view the non-scientific way of these cameras. I think that they're great in their own aspect, but if you want the best of both worlds, full frame probably will be for you. You can get the bigger bodies where it feels good in the hand. So if you have bigger hands or anything like that, you might want to go with something bigger like that. The lenses collections that you have are phenomenal when it comes down to the full frame type of lenses. They tend to be, well, fairly bigger, but you have really good focal ranges if you want to go with zoom ranges. The prime lenses tend to be really great with a shallow depth of field that just look a lot nicer than most of the time with the bokeh comparison with, you know, APS-C. But if you need something a lot smaller, APS-C line of cameras are great. They have a lot of bang for your buck, especially because of the size to the lens selections that you can get for the price point, that you can kind of dabble a little bit more what you would like. I've actually been asked a little bit recently for somebody wanting to go from APS-C to full frame, and they were kind of wondering what the pros and cons could be. And I told them, well, if you're wanting to go a little bit more with a little bit probably faster autofocus and better performance overall, because it has probably a little bit more technology that they go with these type of cameras. Like I said, for the prosumer type of things, it's just probably for you. And they were a little bit confused of how the sizing of the lenses would work, because they were like, if I have a 35mm APS-C, what I need to get the same look of that into full frame? And I told them about a nifty 50, because the 35mm would be about a 52.5 in full frame. So you just kind of have to go accordingly, because with a medium format, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not remembering, but it's like, I just usually multiply it by 0.8 and it gives me the focal range of what it would be into full frame. So technically like a 35 is really like a 23 or whatever it is, full frame or something like that. So that's essentially how you kind of go with it backwards when it comes down to that. But anyways, that's just kind of my thought process when it comes down to knowing what camera style you're gonna want to get. And this is what I've done for myself. APS-C is kind of like a daily driver that you just want to bring something smaller with you, that is just more for fun, in my opinion. You can start very great with it so that you can use it for getting your kind of knowledge into the go, so you can start taking more photos and videos and become a little bit more knowledgeable when it comes down to your camera gear as you keep improving, to then not be so limited as you go into full frame, because full frame, like I said, is a mix of both of these cameras into one. You get the best of both worlds to a certain degree, where you get a little bit nicer kind of, well, sensor size, where it's not obviously medium format, but it's a full frame with a, you know, good low light capabilities, good fast readouts for photo and video, and as well you get very good glass when it comes down to the lenses for the full frame. That's one of the reasons why I personally went more with the full frame type of lenses and cameras for myself, because it just worked better for what I was looking for. I shoot a lot of sports photography, and using my Sony a7 IV is really great for that, and obviously even the a7C Mark II, but personally I just think that it just worked a lot better for the type of things that I wanted to do. And as well with portrait photography, if I needed to have something to go faster to just capture the moment so I didn't miss something so quickly, and just because you never know, if you're out and about doing lifestyle photography and portraits, you kind of need to be on the money with that autofocus. Medium format, great. Like I said, it's more like of an art type of thing for me, and that's just kind of how it goes. Maybe if you're doing more just headshots only in a more professional setting in a studio, could be the best option for you, but really great cameras no matter what. Just kind of wanted to share my non-scientific reason as to kind of what the differences between these cameras, and hopefully it'll help you out to have just more of like an experience, opinion-based kind of video of this, rather than having just simply kind of just trash on each thing or something like that. Because I know I've seen some people kind of hate on APS-C versus full frame or medium format, but for me, I love each of them for different reasons, and that's just how it goes. So now the ultimate question is going to be, what do you shoot with and why? Have you chosen to mainly shoot with one type of, you know, style of camera, or are you wanting to kind of maybe dive into something different? I would love to know your thoughts, so make sure to leave them down below, and let's see what you have to share when it comes down to this video. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, share this video with a friend. I'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.